I'm really happy to be here at the Center of Poetry in Chicago and for some of the world. I'm going to read some from Crazy Brave, my memoir, that I was reluctant to write. I was actually 14 years behind contract. Yeah, with Norton, which is something that wouldn't happen these days. And the reason I was 14 years late is not because I sat for 14 years until they told me till my editor, Jill, told me that they were calling the book in. I did write the book. I started writing it. I wrote several versions of it, but they weren't fitting right. One version was going to be called Love Supreme, and it was going to be vignettes. Another one was short stories and I did one that worked. There was a story arc, it worked nicely, but then as I continued writing, my life did not fit into nice short stories. And then I realized I was running away from the story that wanted to be written, and because I wanted to write after I became a poet, not the stuff before. And finally, when Jill at the Taos Summer Writers conferences were calling the book in, I finally sat down with my spirit and those who helped me write and said, okay, I give up. I give up. I will write what you want me to write. And so this is it. And it wound up this little book. At one point, I took out about 100 pages I'm a poet, just to craft it into something, I guess a sort of poetic memoir. And I will start with this. This is the opening. Once, I was so small I could barely see over the top of the back seat of the black Cadillac my father bought with his Indian oil money. He polished and tuned his car daily. I wanted to see everything. This was around the time I acquired language, when something happened that changed my relationship to the spin of the world. It changed even the way I looked at the sun. This suspended integer of time probably escaped ordinary notice in my parents' universe, which informed most of my vision in the ordinary world. They were still omnipresent gods. We were driving somewhere in Tulsa, the northern border of the Creek Nation. I don't know where we were going or where we had been, but I know the sun was boiling the asphalt. The car windows were open for any breeze. As I stood on tiptoes on the floorboard behind my father, a handsome god who smelled of Old Spice, whose slick black hair was always impeccably groomed, his clothes perfectly creased and ironed. The radio was on. Even then, I loved the radio, jukeboxes, or any magic thing containing music. I wonder what signaled this moment, a loop of time that on first glance could be any place in time. I became acutely aware of the line the jazz trumpeter was playing, a sound I later associated with Miles Davis. I didn't know the words jazz or trumpet. I don't know how to say it, with what words or sounds, but in that confluence of hot southern afternoon, in the breeze of aftershave and humidity, I followed that sound to the beginning, to the birth of sound. I was suspended in whirling stars. I grieved my parents' failings, my own life, which I saw stretching the length of that rhapsody. My rite of passage into the world of humanity occurred then through jazz. The music was a startling bridge between familiar and strange lands. I heard stomp dance shells singing. I saw suits, satin, fine hats. I heard workers singing in the fields. It was a way to speak beyond the confines of ordinary language. I still hear it. I'm actually working on a project now. It's called We Were There When Jazz Was Invented. The Public Theater has given me a commission for the play, and it will show how my tribe was part of the origins of blues and jazz. So any memoir, I guess you have to go to your parents. And my parents came from oppositions. They were both members of enemy tribes. One was poor. My mother came from poor sharecroppers, from people who loved poetry and music. They were Cherokee and Irish, which was a lethal combination. A fun one, though. And from French and German. And my father's people were members of the Muskogee Creek Nation, from leaders including Menahui, who was, I'm 7 generations from Menahui, who stood up against Andrew Jackson and the US government, and against the unlawful removal of our people from our lands in the Southeast. And I come from about 3 principal chiefs of the tribe, from speakers and orators. So that was quite a mixture. But my parents were also made of fire and water. So this is another little section I'm going to skip around. My mother-to-be was fire. Those of fire move about the earth with inspiration and purpose. They are creative and can consume and be consumed by their desires. They are looking for purpose, a place in which to create. They can be so entranced with the excitement of creation that their dreams burn up, turn to ashes. My father-to-be was of the water and could not find a hold on the banks of earthiness. Water people can easily get lost, and they may not comprehend that they are lost. They succumb easily to the spirits of alcohol and drugs. They will always search for a vision that cannot be found on earth. And I live with my parents in Tulsa. Here's my water. And this was around the time when I was 8 years old. I asked for books for my birthday. I love poetry. I had no notion of becoming a poet. We didn't have poets in our neighborhood, at least poets that we call poets. But my mother gave me a copy of Louis Untermeyer's Golden Books Family Treasury of Poetry, which I adored. It's still in print. I bought it for my grandchildren, and I bought myself a copy. Because when I go back, it's like going back into those places, into wide-reaching places that sang to me and still sing to me. So this is a little section. About the time I was 8, which was around the time my parents broke apart, the house broke apart. When I was 8 years old, my mother gave me a copy of Louis Untermeyer's Golden Books Family Treasury of Poetry for my birthday. I love poetry. It was singing on paper. And to open that book was to disappear into many dream worlds, like the ones I had left behind after I started school and began to perfect language. The collection was generous in scope and included everyone from Elizabeth Bishop and her spectacular poem, The Fish, to William Blake's The Tiger and the hypnotic lines, Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. To Emily Dickinson, I'm Nobody, Who Are You? And Lewis Carroll's The Crocodile, How Doth the Little Crocodile Improve His Shining Tail. Those poems, taken as a group, summed up my soul at that crucial moment in my personal history. My father was out with his girlfriends or coming home drunk and fighting with my mother. He was the tiger, tiger, burning bright. My parents were in the process of a difficult divorce. My escape was remembering fishing with my grandfather the summer before and the rainbow, rainbow, rainbow of the caught fish glittering in the afternoon sunlight. I saw the police come to the house. My father staggered in and out with his belongings, with the smell of other women like strange clouds on his clothes. My mother confided my father's shortcomings in me, and I advised her to leave my father. I felt like I was nobody. Who are you? My father disappeared, and so did I in this world without father. Emptiness took the place of everything I had known to be true. With the alligators of the crocodile, I could find refuge in another realm below this one. There are underground cities, other peoples. And then we went from there to a stepfather who was difficult, challenging, and not a very nice man. Years later, I've come to terms with him somewhat and realized that, he was making everyone else miserable. When he died, we celebrated. But I realized what a sad person he must have been. And he was a teacher. We have many teachers in this realm. And sometimes I think some people give themselves up perhaps to take that part of the story. And so during that time, I had to do, it was hard writing about that period of time. And I kept thinking about Meredith LeSueur, who was a mentor, a wonderful writer, poet. And I remember her calling me and telling me, I'm dying. And I thought, oh my God. And I was in my early 20s. I had just started writing poetry. And I remember thinking, oh my God, she's dying, and this immediacy. Well, it took her 4 years, but she recognized the process and she was elated with the process because she was going to watch it and participate in it, not as something that was to be dreaded, but something to be celebrated because it was part of her life. And so she would call me and we would talk. And one thing that she was talking about some of her regrets. And one of her regrets was, she said, and she was talking about her novel, The Girl. And I think it's one of the finest, books of American literature. And she was saying, I think the language was too beautiful. Because she was talking about difficult things. But she was writing her soul language. I mean, and I didn't know what to say. I mean, she was incredible, and I was a child, basically, in a lot of ways. But I always remembered that. And so as I was writing this, I was thinking, well, how can I make this beautiful? Because as a poet, I mean, I don't want to, it was very difficult to write as a poet, this section. So I don't usually read anything too much from that section. But what saved me was Indian boarding school, and most of the stories of Indian boarding school are like the ones of my son-in-law, a young Navajo man who was dragged by missionaries from his yard, not that long ago. But I got the opportunity to go to an Indian boarding school. My mother says I came home with a notice from school saying, that there was an Indian boarding school and I wanted to go. To get out of that, to get out. Plus, I wanted to be around other Native students. And I was lucky in that I got to go to the Institute of American Indian Arts for high school. And I didn't take poetry there. I took drama and dance from amazing. We wound up on tour. I was one of the youngest people on tour. And the curriculum was arts. It was started in the mid-'60s when it was discovered that Native students, often had a great aptitude for arts, and the arts are healing for cultures, for societies, and they tell the truth and also point us in fresh directions to renew us as humans and renew the person or the people of cultures, renew our generations. So that's what saved me. But it was also that's also what being there also helped give me the vision of what would be the vision of my art, which is also poetry and music. Because even I was with high school and we had some postgraduate students, we were thinking about how our own cultural gifts and treasures in our tribes, and then we loved, at least I loved Jim Morrison and the Doors, Jimi Hendrix, the Four Tops, the Supremes, and Frank Zappa. And we were thinking about how can we incorporate, because they were naturally being incorporated in us with things that were of the Muskogee tribe and so on. And I was lucky that the famous Quapaw Cherokee composer Louis Ballard was assigned as my advisor. And he was a presence. And he became very important to me as I started doing music. But I always say music and poetry came into the world together in dance. They're never far away. But then I wound up and I got to go on tour. It was quiet, we were doing dance and combining elements of dance with plays. But then I wound up as a teenage mother back in Oklahoma, living on nothing. And I used to walk because I could get out of the house and walk and walk and walk. And here's a page about that. When I lived in Tahlequah, I used to walk through town, up and down hills, along the creek, by storefronts filled with items I had no money to buy. I walked when I was hugely pregnant and then after my son was born. It was my time alone. As I walked, I could hear my abandoned dreams making a racket in my soul. They urged me out the door or up in the night so they could speak to me. They wanted form, line, story, and melody and did not understand why I had made this unnecessary detour. Think for yourself, girl. Your people didn't walk all that way just so you could lay down their dreams. I wanted more, and I didn't know how I would get it. My days were consumed with the drudgery of survival. I took care of the household, made meals of beans, fried potatoes, and cheap meat. I negotiated with a husband who was essentially a boy. He didn't know how to grow up. His father had abandoned the family, and he had no father map. There were flashes of inspiration and joy. I saw my son sitting by the screen door making dirt parachutes, his fine baby hair lit by the sun, singing with the radio. And my stepdaughter in a striped jumper with balloons in honor of her 4th birthday climbing up swings in a park. But this wasn't enough to sustain the need for artistic expression. I believe that if you do not answer the noise and urgency of your gifts, they will turn on you or drag you down with their immense sadness at being abandoned. And then not long after that, we moved back to Tulsa. We were living in the Cherokee Nation, moved back to Tulsa, which is also the Creek Nation, it still is. And I got this crazy idea I wound up going to the circus with the kids, and one of the men of the Flying Trapeze Act came walking up to me down the aisle, and I didn't know why I thought he was walking towards someone else. It's not every day you have somebody in a cape and tights walking towards you. And he was very friendly with me, and I couldn't understand why. And then he says, "I'll meet you here after," and I didn't know what to say. But as I was watching them fly and back and forth, I got the idea that this would be a good job for my husband. Because we had both been in that drama and dance troupe, and he was an amazing dancer. He was compared, to me, he was incredible. He was getting offers to Jacob's Pillow and other places, but he couldn't see himself in that kind of place because of where he came from. He just couldn't imagine it, I think. So instead, he was losing every job he got in pizza places because he would get angry. And so this guy wound up meeting us. I got the idea that he could do this kind of job because he was such a good dancer and he was known for his ability to fly and his leaps. So the guy comes to meet me. I said, "Well, let's go. I want you to meet my husband." And I had no idea what this guy was up to. I was very naive. And of course, I introduced the acrobat to my husband. They were civil to each other as I explained my idea. A ripple of tension coursed through all of us. It was my dream of flying, my fantasy. It didn't belong to anyone else. After I left the pizza parlor that afternoon, the flying man insisted on accompanying me to my apartment and waited as I put the children down for their naps. I was confused about his intentions, but offered him coffee and water, which he declined. Then he praised my beauty and asked me to leave with him immediately for Corsica. The exhilaration of the force of possibility penned me for a moment in the slant of late afternoon sun. This was what I had been waiting for, but it wouldn't fit, and nothing I could do would make it fit into a map that was apparently there, but not there. I told him I couldn't go anywhere, not even Corsica. I had children. I asked him to leave. The circus left town that afternoon. My husband lost his job at the pizzeria a few years later, as I had predicted. We moved to another part of town after he found work in another pizza restaurant, and his mother followed us. But I do have some connection with Italy. I have 3 books out in Italy and a 4th in the works, so that kind of connection didn't end. I haven't made it to Corsica yet, though. And then I wound up a student at the University of New Mexico, actually in pre-med. That's another story. I wound up in Santa Fe working in a gas station called the Mini-Serve Gas Mart because I was wearing a miniskirt and pumping gas, which was unusual. And there was a line outside. But I liked the job because it was different and it was outside. But then I started working in the hospital as a nursing assistant, and that's how I just got to the university. And I found out that all kinds of people will help you if you're a young Native woman who wants to be a doctor. But then I went back into art, people could understand that, natives, art, okay, cool, we're cool with that. But when I changed my major to poetry after, when I was almost done with school, it was very difficult to get any money to go to graduate school in poetry. But that's another story. Anyway, this was when I was with my daughter's father, and it was that night, as we walked home from the bar, and I waited for him behind the motel. He seemed to take forever. It was about 2:30 in the morning, as I stood there, the avenue grew quieter after the initial rush of traffic from the bar. The desk lamp inside the motel office made me lonely. I felt far away from everything. I carried an ache under my ribs that was like radar. It told me I was miles away from the world I intended to make for my son and myself. I saw my easel set up in the corner of the living room in our apartment next to my son's box of toys. I imagined having the money to walk up to the motel office to rent a room of my own. I knew what I would do. I would sleep until I could sleep no more. I would wake up with my dreams and listen and sketch and paint the visions I'd put aside to take care of everyone else. I recalled the dream I had had of a daughter who wanted to be born. I'd been painting all night when she appeared to me. She was a baby with fat cheeks, and then she was a grown woman. She asked me to give birth to her. "This isn't a good time," I told her. I was in the middle of finals and assisting in planning for a protest of the killing of Navajo street drunks for fun by some white high school students. They had just been questioned and set free with no punishment. "Why come into this kind of world?" I asked her. Her intent made a fine, unwavering line that connected my heart to hers. I walked behind the motel to look for him. I found his shoes under a tree. Beyond them were his socks like two dark salamanders. A little farther beyond his socks was his belt, and then I followed a trail of pants, shirt, and underwear until I was standing in the courtyard of the motel. My stomach turned and twisted as I considered all the scenarios a naked, drunk Indian man might get into in a motel on the main street of the city. I heard a splash in the pool. I remember thinking, "He's Pueblo Indian, he can't swim." I considered leaving him there to flounder. It would be his foolish fault, as well as the fault of a society that builds its cities over our sacred places. At that moment, his disappearance would be a sudden relief. It was then I first felt our daughter moving within me. She awakened me with a flutter, a kick. As I walked to the pool, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I never told her father about the night she showed up to announce her intentions, or how I saw her spirit when she was conceived, wavering above us on a fine sheen of light. I never told my daughter how I pulled her father from deep water. Though on the surface, I continued as a student who garnered scholarships and made excellent grades and was now beginning to publish my first poems in the University Student magazine, I continued to struggle with panic. I considered all the possible reasons: the mother-in-law witching, tribal history, the strangle of jealousy from others, the banishment from my home, faltering into territory and offending spirits there. But no matter the reasoning, it remained a fact of my life. I recalled how the dream of the chase began around the time our father left home. It would begin with a sound just like the panic, like whirring bull roars making an eerie echo that traveled across time, and I would begin running. One night, after writing my last paper for a class, I struggled in a sweaty, anxiety-ridden sleep. I was running, and then I was cornered in a white room. I could not find my voice. In all the years of the chase, I had never come to this place. I heard a congested, snuffling breathing. The monster rose up before me. I saw him for the first time. The horror transfixed me. I had no room in my mind for such a being. I realized how tired I was of the chase, of all the years of the chase. Just when I was about to give up, the knowing reminded me that I knew how to fly. I thought, fly, and I leapt to the ceiling of the white room. I was safe. Then the monster flew up. There was nothing else I could do. With a sudden, unexpected grace, all the fear within me escaped. There was no panic. I was a lightness I had never experienced before in my life. The monster put his hand to me. He did not touch me. He disappeared. I was free, free, free. I carried that dream back through several layers of consciousness to where I stood in the future with a stack of poems and a saxophone in my hands. That night I wrote this poem. It was one of my first poems. I release you, my beautiful and terrible fear. I release you. You are my beloved and hated twin, but now I don't know you as myself. I release you with all the pain I would know at the death of my children. You are not my blood anymore. I give you back to the soldiers who burned down my home, beheaded my children, raped and sodomized my brothers and sisters. I give you back to those who stole the food from our plates when we were starving. I release you, fear, because you hold these scenes in front of me, and I was born with eyes that can never close. I release you. I release you. I release you. I release you. I am not afraid to be angry. I am not afraid to rejoice. I am not afraid to be hungry. I am not afraid to be full. I am not afraid to be black. I am not afraid to be white. I am not afraid to be hated. I am not afraid to be loved, to be loved, to be loved. Fear. Oh, you've choked me, but I gave you the leash. You've gutted me, but I gave you the knife. You have devoured me, but I laid myself across the fire. I take myself back, fear. You are not my shadow any longer. I won't hold you in my ears, my eyes, my voice, my belly, or in my heart, my heart, my heart. But come here, fear. I am alive, and you are so afraid of dying. It was the spirit of poetry who reached out and found me as I stood there at the doorway between panic and love. There are many such doorways in our lives. Some are small and hidden in the ordinary. Others are gaping and obvious, like the car wreck we walk away from, meeting someone and falling in love, or an earthquake followed by a tsunami. When we walk through them to the other side, everything changes. I had come this far without the elegance of speech. I didn't have the physical handicap of stuttering, but I could not speak coherently. I stuttered in my mind. I could not express my perception of the sacred. I could speak everyday language. Please pass the salt. I would like, where are we going? I wanted the intricate and metaphorical language of my ancestors to pass through to my language, my life. Much like the night I witnessed the healer become a poem in a faraway country, though in spirit nothing is ever far away, the spirit of poetry came to me. To imagine the spirit of poetry is much like imagining the shape and size of the knowing. It is a kind of resurrection light. It is the tall ancestor spirit who has been with me since the beginning, or a bear or a hummingbird. It is 100 horses running the land in a soft mist, or it is a woman undressing for her beloved in firelight. It is none of these things. It is more than everything. You're coming with me, poor thing. You don't know how to listen. You don't know how to speak. You don't know how to sing. I will teach you. I followed poetry. Okay. So now I'm going to do a newer poem called Equinox, and a couple of poems, including one I wrote last night, which is dangerous to do. And then end with a song because of the theme of this Chicago Humanities Festival is America, and I have a song called This America, which I will just play on here. I didn't bring my sax today, and I don't have the tracks for that, and it sounds better with all the mixing here. So this is Equinox, and it's about, you know, that moment. It's sunrise, and we're all in a ceremony together, and it's marked, one way it's marked as sunrise and sunset. They join us together as a people, as trees, as, you know, everything that we all are. And I was standing there waiting to be picked up, and I was thinking about, sometimes you can be filled with grief and joy at the same time, at the journey we're all on in this story matrix. It's so complicated and terrible sometimes and ugly, and yet there's light in every cell of it. I must keep from breaking into the story by force. If I do, I will find a war club in my hand, and the smoke of grief staggering toward the sun. Your nation dead beside you. Walking away, though it has been an eternity, and from each drop of blood, each one springs up sons and daughters and trees, a mountain of sorrows, of songs. I tell you this from the dusk of a small city in the north, not far from the birthplace of cars and industry. Geese are returning to mate, and crocuses have broken through the frozen earth. Soon they will come for me, and I will make my stand before the jury of destiny. Yes, I will answer in the clatter of the new world. I have broken my addiction to war and desire. Okay, that's missing the saxophone. Okay. I have two new poems, and then later I'll say, why did I do that? But this one's called Speaking Tree, and these are part of a book of poetry I'm working on. I had a play I was working on called I Think I Love You, an all-night round dance, but I'm turning that into a book of poems, which will have an all-night round dance, something da-da-da-da-da, which I haven't figured out yet. And it's really about love and et cetera, which concerns all of us throughout our whole life. And this is called Speaking Tree. And the poem came after Sandra Cisneros, who I met at the Iowa Writers Workshop and who brought me here for my first time to Chicago to meet her family when we were students together. She wrote me an email and said, I had a beautiful dream. I was dancing with a tree. So this set off this poem. Those who have forgotten say trees are not sentient beings, but they do not understand poetry. Nor can they hear the singing of trees when they are fed by rain and music, or hear their cries of anguish when they are broken and bereft. Because I am a woman carrying a yearning I cannot bear, I long to be a tree, planted in a moist, dark earth between sunrise and sunset. And because I want you next to me, I have made you a tree. The deepest rooted dream of a tree is to walk even just a little ways from the place next to the gate to the edge of the river of life and drink. I hear trees talking long after the sun has gone down. Imagine what it would be like to dance together in this land of water and knowledge, to drink deep what is undrinkable, to hold in our hands that which cannot be touched. And then this one called Anything, which I've been still revising, but it's a little poem about somebody being madly in love, so madly in love they can turn things into other things. Anything. I am willing to do anything for you. I'll make my heart a red bird, weave a field of ripe berries, a sea of waving green. And walking towards us from a mountain made by a pig god is a wreath of misty rain. Beneath it we can wash and play when we've had our fill. I've arranged this small world with wings and food for you, woven the edge with turquoise ocean, and laced the horizon with scarlet thread. Can you hear me singing for you? I know you're washing dishes. Put down that dish rag and go to the window. Open it. So I wrote that one in Chicago. I don't know if I have time. I have a little 3-page thing and then a song. Do I have time for both of those? Okay. This one's about saxophone. I wanted to play sax. Music was kind of taken away from me. I didn't fight for it. I didn't come back to it I didn't start playing sax till I was about 40. And, but this was about coming to Sandra's house and hearing Gato Barbieri and about the sax. So I'll read this little kind of vignette. And then I'll end with a song called This America, in which I'm playing sax, flutes, and singing, et cetera, in honor of this event. And so, and I revised the opening a little, so I'll see if it's called I Heard My Soul Singing for Sandra Cisneros, Gato Barbieri, and Tony James. It was in the late 70s. I was a student at the Iowa Writers Workshop and went home to Chicago with my friend Sandra to visit her family. That Saturday, as we sat drinking coffee with her mother, we heard her many brothers talking behind the doors of their rooms. They were supposed to be cleaning. I heard the traffic in the city. I heard everything as if it were singing, and above them and over and through all of us, I heard a horn player weaving the song together. What are you doing there, soul? I asked myself. I felt naked and blown open without my soul fastened in its usual hidden and dark place. I asked Sandra, who's that on saxophone? It's my brother's music, she said. It's Gato Barbieri. I had wanted to play saxophone since junior high school. I loved the sultry, longing sound of the sax. I played clarinet in elementary school 1 hour a week for a few years. I used the same couple of reeds and labored with the rest of the small group of students who played in band with just enough practice to keep it together. What kept me going was that perfect song I kept hearing just beyond the field of knowing. I felt moments of it as my breath attempted to make the clarinet into a living being. At the beginning of my first junior high semester, when the band teacher asked for students to play alto sax, my hand shot up. Girls can't play sax, he explained as he chose boys to be players. I gave up then on saxophone. I walked away from music. And then I met Gato and his sax in Sandra's house. Gato and I made a circle with our spirits. I told Gato that I had escaped from the Iowa Writers' Workshop for the weekend. I told him I felt lost without mountains, desert, and the memory of white birds. I confided in him the longing I was afraid to name. I told him I write poetry to leave a trail so that love can find me. I told him that poetry is lonely without the music. I wanted to tell him with his saxophone everything, the way you do when you meet a lover who's going to open all the doors in your heart. You compare stories, you intertwine them so they can grow together for a while. And then I argued with myself, you can't say everything. What will he think of you? Besides, to speak everything is to exhaust mystery. Whenever a saxophone begins to sing in a story, a door opens to romance. For a time, we will no longer move about so lonely here, far away from the house of the sun, moon, and stars. Gato listened with his horn perched on his lap. Like most men, he keeps his thoughts to himself when it comes to women and love. And he's Argentine, and he's a horn player. He hears melody and longing. He was listening to how the rhythm of the heart played against the rhythm of the traffic in Chicago on a Saturday afternoon. He feels the fire at the center of the earth. I wanted to tell him, once I forgot myself and gave in to the music. I saw cities full of lovers and how, though the earth held them close with gravity, they became birds flying together above the city, disappearing into openings in the sky that only two people can enter together. Ah, but what about being on the earth and how we move about the earth? He sang with his horn, and he broke my heart with his longing. It was some years before I picked up a horn and blew spirit into it. The first horn I played was a King Super tenor saxophone. My then lover, a horn player, wrote out the G blues scale for me, and I began there in the heartache of the Americas. In that scale are ships from Africa and Europe. In it are my people dancing in a widening spiral beneath circles of star nebula, giving birth to the swing. I walked up and down the scale past babies crying in the night for milk, lovers waking in the dawn for more. I left that relationship, that apartment, that city, but kept going with my horn and with the bottom line of that G blues. I still talk to Gato whenever I pick up my horn. He's older and wiser in the way that we all become wiser when we lose what we love and learn to keep going. One way to look at it, he told me one day as I sawed through scales to make muscle for flying, is that we are all lost. We were already lost the day we were born. In music, we can become tragically and beautifully lost and found again. I thought of all the doors that had opened and closed. I thought of how many that I loved were no longer on this earth. I thought of all my mother's songs looking for a place to live. I thought of all the Saturdays in the world. I started with G and rounded the bend at B flat. I followed my soul. Thank you. So Chicago appears to inspire me. I did the poem Woman Hanging from the 13th Floor was written in Chicago. It seems like every time I come here, something happens like that. Well, I'm going to close with this piece called This America. And I guess I honor it too, and especially because of the theme here, and then the elections, and then the changes we're all going through together on a, as people of the earth too. And I want to say thank you, Mado, for being a wonderful audience, and for the Poetry Foundation, and for poetry, the spirit of poetry that lives with all of us. If you look from the stars, you will see truly. You will see your breath, your breathing as clouds. You will see the ancestor dreamers, the witness winds. They are watching this America. Nita Ojan, Wajanogi. Nita Ojan, Wajanogi. America, America, where are you going? Where have you been? Remember the sky you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. That is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving tonight to dreaming. Nita Ojan, Wajanogi. Nita Ojan, Wajanogi. Remember your birth, where the peacekeepers stood. Eagle above us, earth below.